Hello, and thank you for joining our webinar. Today I'm going to talk about developing your IT factor, the executive qualities that will enhance your professional image and marketability. I'm Robert Hosking, Executive Director of OfficeTeam, and in celebration of IAAP's Administrative Professionals Week, we're thrilled to have you join us for this informative webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to address a few housekeeping points. Just kind of go through these one at a time. First of all, webinar recording. In case you miss any part of the presentation or you would like to share it with others, the webinar is being recorded. And you'll be able to access the recording a few hours after the live event using the same link that you used to join the webinar. So just go right back in through that same link and you'll be able to access the recording. Following the webinar, you'll also receive an email with a link to the archived version. Your webinar player. So your webinar console features several widgets, and they're across the bottom of the screen that will enhance today's discussion. And you can scroll over each icon for a description of what it'll do, just to become familiarized with those. Submitting questions. So we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and you can enter your question at any time throughout the webinar in that Q&A box on the left side of the webinar console, and we'll answer as many questions as we possibly can. A copy of the slides. So you can access a copy of today's slides by clicking on the resource list icon on the console toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And it's a green icon with a folder on it. And so when you see that, again, you can click on that, and that'll give you a list of all the resources there. Technical support. Click the yellow icon with a question mark on your console toolbar if you need any help during the live session today. So anything you need at all, click that yellow icon. And then Twitter hashtag. We will be live tweeting today's event using the hashtag AdminsRock. So feel free to tweet along. All right, well, let's get started. As I mentioned, I'm Robert Hosking, Executive Director of OfficeTeam. And OfficeTeam is the world's leading staffing service specializing in the temporary placement of highly skilled office and administrative support professionals. And you can read my full bio by clicking on the blue speaker bio icon on your console toolbar at the bottom of the screen. So what's your IT factor? So first, I want to talk about exactly what it means to have the IT factor. And we all know that working hard greatly improves your chances of being promoted. But what else can you do to give yourself a career advantage? And one step you may be overlooking is developing an executive presence. So a big part of getting ahead in business can be attributed to a quality you can't measure, and that's the IT factor. So the question, do you have it? How do you know if you have it? And how do you create an executive presence? That's what we're going to discuss over the course of the webinar today. Administrative staff are increasingly gaining influence in the office, making it especially vital to have an executive presence. And we've always known how valuable administrative professionals are to companies, but an OfficeTeam survey really confirms it. And you'll see on the slide, nearly all, so 94% of senior managers said that their administrative assistant is important to their success at work, and really goes without saying. In addition, according to the Office of the Future research that we conducted with IAAP, some administrative professionals are often taking on new titles that show their growing importance and their leadership roles. So some of these emerging administrative job titles include Chief Executive Administrator, Director of First Impressions, Administrative Chief of Staff, Director of Administration, and Administrative Services Manager. So enhancing your professional image will give you an executive presence to help you get to that next level in your administrative career, whether it's a new job or whether you're looking for a promotion within your current company. There are really 5 main areas that make up a strong executive presence and boost your marketability. So the first is showing initiative. Second, communicating effectively. The third is building relationships. Fourth, dressing for success. And then number 5, using body language to your advantage. And again, we'll go through each one of those over the course of the session today. So first up is showing initiative. And those with executive presence don't wait for someone to tell them what to do. When they see something that needs to get done, they do it, or figure out a plan on how to get it done. What steps need to be put into place to be able to get it done. So for instance, if you know that your boss is traveling to a conference in a couple of days, you might confirm all the reservations in advance, compile an itinerary before you're asked to do it. It's likely something that will be very valuable for the person that you're supporting. And so if you're proactive and go ahead and do all of those things, you can get it to them before they need to actually ask for it. Or maybe you spot a typo on the company website and contact the appropriate person immediately to get it fixed. Some actions like this can really have a big impact, again, in your overall initiative taking and the way that you're perceived as someone that does take initiative within the company. People who have that it factor are proactive, decisive, and confident. And it's really hard to create an executive presence if you waffle with your decisions and rarely speak up. So it's really a question of being heard or certainly being seen. And as you're given opportunities to offer input, share your feedback. Make sure that you're thoughtful in feedback, but sharing feedback when asked and when involved in a group or participating in other activities within the organization. Now, be careful also not to sound wishy-washy either, because that means that you may look to be uncertain or not really confident or comfortable in how you're answering. So be clear that you understand the topic and feel confident in your advice. So, for example, I recommend we purchase this software because it offers these features, or it specifically can handle these areas which are really important to the company today. And that sounds a lot stronger than, I think this software might be a good choice, but, meaning you're not really sure or confident that what you're saying is in fact how you're feeling. And it's okay to acknowledge that you're considering different options or looking at things a different way, but the way that you sound and the confidence you exude is particularly important. So according to an OfficeTeam survey, 97% of administrative professionals said anticipating their manager's needs is important to their career. Whereas 94% of executives agreed the ability to anticipate the boss's needs is important. So that really reinforces this argument that showing initiative is essential in today's work environment. It's absolutely critical to always be thinking about the next step. What impact will this have? What do I need to do today that will help in moving forward without having to be asked to do something each and every time? And you likely already have those initiative-taking skills, even if you don't realize it. And sometimes I think particularly when someone's new within an organization, they're not as certain, but be thinking about those things that are consistently being asked for and taking the initiative to get them done. As you're learning to speak up and show initiative, there are 3 things that'll help you really a great deal. First, be in tune with the organization. So what do we mean by that? To become better at anticipating what needs to be done, you need to be keenly aware of your organization's business cycles. So at most companies, there are those activities that occur at the same time, every month, every quarter, or every year. And there's pinpoints, or there's periods within the year where these things will always come up or always need to be done. So take advantage of this predictability when you're setting time frames and deadlines, both for yourself and for the people that you support, particularly if you know that it's something that, let's say your executive report for your company's annual meeting is always due on the same date. you can plan ahead to avoid scheduling other major projects for that week. And maybe even putting those dates and deadlines into the calendars of the people that you support so that when they're planning other things, they see those visibly and they book around them and anticipate them themselves, realizing, oh my gosh, I need to get this done. It's in my calendar. I'm going to even need to block time in the week prior to be able to get through the process of getting that accomplished. So really important to help those that you support by using their calendars as well. Second, learn to be assertive. So you can start small on this, and perhaps you volunteer to take on a new assignment or sign up to join a committee. Challenge yourself to ask one good question or contribute a point in every single meeting that you're in. So as you're sitting in the meeting and you're listening and you're participating, what question or point do you really want to get across? What do you really need to ask? And be sure that you challenge yourself to do that. You're likely to feel more fulfilled at work and certainly as a result of the meeting, and you can make quality contributions to your team as well, and they're looking for you to be able to do that. So really challenge yourself in that way. And then third, believe in yourself. Even on those tough days when you're feeling discouraged or you're feeling underappreciated, remember that you're strong and capable and you can do this. And so being assertive is easier when you believe in yourself and you're feeling good about things. So it's powering through sometimes those moments when maybe you don't feel as good and use that confidence, and that'll certainly come through for others. So to have an executive presence, the next thing that you need is a top-notch verbal and written communication skills. So the more you move up in the organization, the more these abilities will be in the spotlight, and others will be reviewing and scrutinizing. So whether you're crafting top-level reports, you're giving a company-wide presentation, or you're sending staff emails, this is really critical. And when your prospects may be hindered if leaders worry you'll make a negative impression when you're sharing information. So if there's a history of perhaps communication that isn't as strong, there's this worry that can sometimes build up. So if you have specific communication weaknesses, for instance, maybe you're not the greatest at summarizing complex information in a written form, and you know that. Consider taking classes to improve your abilities. It's worth the extra effort. In the world we live in today, in the business community that we live in today, email communication particularly is so critical, but it is important that that comes across extremely well, and that you're communicating effectively in that medium. In that we're now communicating via email much more than verbally as we may have in the past. So you probably write every day in your current job. It's something you probably don't even think much about, drafting memos, emailing clients, for example. But if you're not very good at it, you might be leaving a bad impression. And so to improve your chances of climbing the ladder, you need to clearly get your message across with your writing. So here are 5 steps to ensure that you're writing great emails and memos. So number 1, get in the writing mindset. It's almost like doing stretches before you need to craft that memo or craft that communication. So before you begin any writing project, gather the necessary resources and have them nearby. So if it's reports that you need, if it's other communication that you need or documents or write-ups that you need to have in front of you to be able to pull this all together, that's really, really critical. Because the more prepared that you are, the more relaxed you'll be as you get started, and you won't be thinking about, oh, I need to find this, or partway through the communication, oh no, I should have pulled that document, or I need to ask somebody a question. It's better to do all of that compilation first, then you can sit down and from beginning to end craft what you need to do. If you're feeling angry, if you're confused or unhappy or you're tired, step away from the keyboard. Take a step back, roll away from the desk, take a walk, get some water, do what you need to do. Chances are you'll write something that you'll regret later. And personal example, when I'm in those circumstances and I go to write something, I end up spending more time later editing what I've written because it doesn't flow well, I'm mixing messages, and so it's really important to take that time and step away for a little bit and come back feeling a little more fresh so you can zone in on what you need to communicate and how you want to communicate it. Number 2 is set your goals. So what's the main message you want to get across? What is it that you need to do in this communication? What do people need to know to be able to support your goal? So in any communication, there's a goal or there's an overall message. And the idea is to get it to people so they can then either act on it or take action or respond in whatever way that they need to. But how do you get that across very, very succinctly? So it's helpful to write down all of your key points in advance so you don't forget any. And that could mean maybe there's only 3 or 4 key items that need to be conveyed. Jot them down somewhere, or even just type them out at the very beginning of the memo as your reference points as you start to craft that communication up. And you can refer back to those to make sure that you've hit them throughout the entire memo or correspondence. It's helpful to write down, so you think about these key points and take those points to create a brief outline of what you'd like to cover so there's a logical order. So that's taking those points, and now I need to create an outline. This can be particularly useful with larger documents. So those that need to either encompass or address a number of issues, that's something that you can build a bit of an outline or a framework with the beginning, the core, the end, and how this should look for the audience that you're trying to convey it to or who it's going to be delivered to. Number 3, get to the point. Now, professionals with strong written communication skills know that it's critical to get to the point with any message, or readers may stop reading. People tune out. A memo or a document that's 4 or 5 pages long, it's less likely everybody will read that right to the very end and retain everything that needs to be done or is presented in that document, simply because they either will lose interest or they lose time and they need to go off and do something else. So they may actually stop reading before the important information, and that's certainly a problem. So if you think about the KISS philosophy, which is the keep it simple, stupid, it's a good one to follow when building out a memo or document, because it includes summaries at the beginning of a big report and use bullets or numbers to separate points. So again, keep it clear and concise. Here's the beginning, here's the summary, and now I'll use bullets or numbers to separate or to differentiate what these key items are. And depending on your audience, you might want to avoid using acronyms or industry jargon. So if you're in a business and this is something that's going out to an external audience, they may not know your internal communication format or acronyms that are associated with certain products or whatever it may be. So try to be a little more broad in that case, or actually on the flip, be more specific, but write it out to what would make sense to them or what would be meaningful for them. Number 4, stay professional. And as you try to improve your written communication skills, take everything you write seriously, steering clear of any controversial or sensitive subjects. It's best if you're thinking this doesn't really sound right, or I'm not really sure if it should go in here, it probably shouldn't. Just a really good rule of thumb to work off of. And remember, you never know who your email could be forwarded to. An email can go to many, many people. And so question then, when in doubt, think about whether you're comfortable if your boss was reading what you've just said. And if, again, the thinking is, no, probably not, or I don't think so, then it's best you probably leave it out of the doc. Check your work and double check it. So spell check doesn't actually catch everything. So it's really worth spending an extra few minutes to reread messages before sending them out. And again, personally I would tell you I've been guilty of this. In a hurry, crafting up an email, hit send and realize I've missed people in the send or the to list, or there's words that are duplicated and I didn't pick it up on a spell check or a grammar check, or it's not formatted the way I wanted it to read. So always go back and check and double check, or ask a coworker to take a look at the crucial document to do a final proofread. So if there's something that you're not sure, and this can easily happen if you've looked at something multiple times, it looks really great to you, one other person's eyes on it with one read-through can pick up a couple of items that need to be adjusted, or maybe recommendations for things that could be changed. And that will really ensure that you're getting the point across clearly and grabbing people's attentions for the right reasons, not because you've missed something in the doc or the doc doesn't look the way that it ultimately should. Now, on the other side of things, we've all seen some terrible emails in our day. And here are a few things not to do when writing if you want to make a good impression. So number one is use every font imaginable. Don't let the formatting of your message overshadow the point you're trying to make. And what we mean by this is really stick to the default fonts your email server uses. Those are fairly standard, but they're standard for a reason. They're easy to use. They're easy to see. Perhaps your company has a font that they recommend or that they typically use, so you can stick with that font. Sparingly use bold and italics for emphasis. Those tools are important. When used appropriately, they can really bring home a point, particularly bold. And you see those italics, you're like, okay, I get it. I know what you're trying to convey. But if used too frequently, it can make the message actually look a little too direct or even mean, depending on how it's listed. And they also lose their effectiveness in some cases as well. Secondly, a massive email signature. So likewise, draw attention away from your message. Certainly include all of your contact information, that's critical, and then anything that your department or company requires in your signature. But there's no need to add distracting animations or copious clip art. And make sure your email sign-off is appropriate as well. So consider using a standard closing like best or sincerely for business correspondence. Now, you all know not to write like you're texting. So use proper greetings, so punctuation, spelling in all of your emails. And in general, you should always avoid using the emoticons as well, particularly in that type of correspondence. Reply all is a powerful tool, and we really need to be careful on how we use it or abuse it. So when replying to a mass email, think about whether you need to reply to everyone or just the sender, and then double check that CC line as well to make sure your audience isn't larger than you intended or than you wanted. I can't tell you how many emails I've received that have gone out. Let's say it's a congratulations email, a very positive reason to send an email. It's been sent out from a senior executive in the company. It's sent out to multiple people, maybe even hundreds, to congratulate somebody on an anniversary or a special celebration. And then how many people do a reply all on that? And it just loads up the inbox versus if you do want to reach out to the recipient of that email and personally congratulate them or thank them or whatever it may be, do that to them directly versus a reply all, which everybody then just becomes irritated as filling their inbox. And because we all lead meetings, or have to address a large group at some point, here are 5 tips to make public speaking less painful. And certainly know that this is a fearful moment for many people when they realize they need to stand in front of a group and present. And I'd even argue that I think for many people, standing in front of a group of their peers or people they work with is actually sometimes even tougher than doing it in front of a group of people you don't even know or you've never met before. So, first thing here, it's keeping things in perspective. And remember that no one's expecting this grand address that's absolutely flawless and, something that, would make you very presidential. It's more when you talk about something, they want to know what it is you're trying to convey or what is it that's the most important component of what you're saying. And so it's when you talk about the new expense reporting system, they want to know about that. It's not all about you and the grandness of your presentation. They're just eager to learn and get the information that they need. So knowing that the focus is on what you have to share, not you, can sometimes take a little bit of that pressure off and calm your nerves a little bit. If you're presenting, you're likely the expert in this. So use that, and use that passion and enthusiasm to let that come through. Secondly, don't wing it. So write clear notes and stick to them. It's always important to prepare, and so that you're not standing up thinking about what you might want to say, because that often comes across that way. It's almost better to have too much information written down as a guide than too little, and that's in case you get nervous. So if you need to refer back to those notes, or you're concerned about missing something, maybe there's a lot of detail that needs to be communicated, a number of steps, and it's a great way to be able to stay on point, but also make sure you've hit all of those key areas as well, so that, again, the communication is really clear. And then make sure everything's well organized so that you don't have trouble getting back on track if you lose your place. That can be, again, very difficult. You're presenting, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my gosh, I need to get back to my notes, and you can't see where your notes left off, or the next bullet isn't clear on your piece of paper. So a couple of tricks in this. Number one would be whether it's cue cards or having notes that are bulleted in bold or in large font so that you can see that. Again, I know many people feel that is a little easier than a script, because a script is difficult. And if you're reading from a script and you get off script coming back, you may not actually end up in the place where you left off. So writing those points out or bullets out can keep you on track. Speak to the bullet and come back to the next one. Number 3 is practice, practice, practice. So the more prepared you are, the more confident you'll feel. It's just natural. But do a trial run in front of people that will give you candid and honest feedback, and ask for those comments about the content, as well as your gestures or your voice quality or your eye contact. Are you using all of those things to help in your presentation? Everybody's been in a presentation where the person presenting is animated and engaging and people feel really great connecting with. But on the flip, everyone's been in the presentation where the person is pan-faced and isn't necessarily reading the audience, or is just running through a script versus, in fact, presenting. And so it's really important to get feedback on that. Did I use my hands effectively? Am I engaged in my eye contact in the way that I'm speaking? If you're really struggling to get it right, consider pursuing training to build your skills and confidence. If this is an area that you believe you need a little bit more help with, absolutely consider training to again, help you in that area. And even if you're not giving a formal presentation, but perhaps just need to speak up about an issue during a meeting, it's worth thinking about what you're going to say in advance and writing those down. I'd say one other trick in this space that somebody told me many, many years ago was, when you're presenting to a group of people, always speak to the person in the back of the room. And that's a way that your voice will in fact carry and be heard by people in the back, versus speaking to the people in the front row. Because if you speak to the people in the front row, tone and volume can easily diminish, and the people in the back become disengaged because they can't hear you. So if you think about, if I'm speaking and I'm enunciating well and I'm projecting well, the people in the back should be able to hear me as clearly as the people in the front. Number 4 is using visual aids. So a great way to clarify key points is to show relevant charts or other graphics. So that's a way of breaking up the presentation a little bit. It's away from you, it's on something else. Just be sure they're large enough for the audience to see and read, and have an easy to understand design on them. Again, I'm sure everybody's been in a meeting where they've had a visual in front of them that's virtually impossible to see, with little graphs on it or charts on it or little arrows, and you're like, I don't even know what's on this, versus a very simple, easy to use graphic that is still very powerful and impactful, but much easier for, again, the people in the back of the room to see as easily as the people in the front of the room. Number 5, stick to the schedule. So make sure formal presentations start and end on time. It's easier to feel confident when people are paying attention than if they're anxious or they're distracted or worrying that your talk will run too late. Everybody's world nowadays is very scheduled and very regimented. And if you've got a half an hour to present, it's really important to stay within that time because it's likely everybody in the room, or for the most part people in the room, have something else to do at the end of that 30-minute presentation that they'll need to get to. So staying on time, and again, in your practice session, it's a great way to make sure that you actually stay on time throughout that session and know that what you need to say can actually be presented in the time that you've got allotted. So the next thing I want to talk about is why building professional relationships is crucial in developing an executive presence. So if you're looking to gain a promotion, you should be making connections across your company. Building good relationships helps make you visible to more members of the organization, but it also bolsters your reputation, which is a great thing. So when you run into a problem and you have those relationships, can make all of the difference in solving them, or certainly make solving them much easier. For example, if you're friendly with the department's IT person, you might find that getting the printer fixed is a little faster, or it's a little easier to get a response in that area. Likewise, if you're looking to find a new position, networking really is essential, and that's all about building relationships. Again, in the world that we live in today, networking is critical, and building those relationships is extremely powerful. So people with that it factor just seem to have a knack for building relationships with others. And the question then becomes, well, how do they do it? What is it that they do that's different, or how do they go about it? Well, first, you need to get your name out there. Introduce yourself to individuals around the office, during company outings, maybe it's in the kitchen, somebody you haven't met before, you're on a different floor and there's people that you're interacting with, maybe even in the elevator. Taking that extra second and introduce yourself can sometimes feel a little uncomfortable, but you never know what doors that can open. Also, volunteer for committees or projects outside your normal job, so kind of above and beyond. People then that you don't normally work with will get to know you, which is great. They'll recognize your strengths and see you as a team player, somebody that is involved, somebody that's willing to go above and beyond, taking initiative, doing a little bit more. People with that wow factor also show that they care about others, and this is something that really, certainly becomes apparent. They're sincere and focus their attention on the group and its goals rather than making it all about themselves. It's not about me, it's about we as a group. And one of the most important qualities is the ability to listen intently to team members' ideas and concerns. So what are the concerns of the team, and what do we need to do about that? And if you want people to support your efforts, you'll want to support their efforts as well. Certainly a give and take world, but if they see you as somebody who's supportive of them, they'll be equally as supportive back, and sometimes even more so. And also, care enough for those that you work with to help them meet their deadlines. If somebody's struggling, or you see somebody needs assistance, maybe there's a project that needs to be completed, or there's something that they need to do to achieve their career success, lend a helping hand, because again, it will come back to you later on. Sometimes you also need to agree to disagree. And not everyone in the workplace will share the same point of view. So it's okay to have a difference of opinions, and that may be uncomfortable sometimes. Be respectful of one another and continue to support others during disagreements. That's important. It's also critical to know that maybe a bigger picture disagreement is the issue, but there's a lot of little things underlying that in fact you do agree on, and talk about those things and build those things, because that can help to resolve or come to a solution that may not be a lose-lose. It may be more of a win-win, even if, again, you agree to disagree. So you may need to be the mediator and remind others that disagreements are okay and that you can agree to disagree. Remember, too, that people may use different strategies than your own to finish their assignments. That doesn't mean you need to micromanage them. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. They just happen to be going about it in a different way and getting to the result that's desired, but they just did it with a different process or in a different way. So when working with others, it's often necessary to control your emotions, and that can really be difficult sometimes. So try not to become frustrated, angry, rude, or show hurt feelings in the office. Keep your emotions in check and don't react impulsively. Probably the best advice, which is you start to feel as though you may be going that way, you're at a breaking point, take a moment away, go and gather yourself, take a deep breath, pausing, collect your thoughts. Again, if you have to leave the room, just excuse yourself, then come back when you're feeling a little better. That can really help to keep the dialogue going versus doing something that you might in fact have regretted or will regret later on. And lastly, it's beneficial to keep at it. So once you've established professional relationships, don't let them fizzle. Regularly check in with your contacts to find out what they're working on. Also, get to know these people on a personal level. So invite them out for coffee, or maybe it's a lunch, and find out what they like to do outside of the office. Get to know some of those interests. You might find that you have a lot in common, and that can really strengthen your connection with others. And by following these tips, you'll build and maintain a really strong professional relationships that could serve you well in your current role and, again, in future roles as well. So the next topic I'd like to cover is dressing for success. And you've heard it many times before, dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have. And this is really, really true, and I would say is something that it kind of resonates with me personally. It was advice I was given very, very early on when I was first looking for a role many years ago now, and has really stuck with me. In an OfficeTeam survey, 80% of executives said clothing choices affect an employee's chance of earning a promotion. That's huge. 80%. So when considering people for promotions, companies tend to look for those who will make a good impression on business contacts. Depending on the industry that you're in, maybe there's client contact, maybe it's alliance partners, but organizations are very concerned about a positive impression with all of the people that they interact with. So how you dress plays a role ultimately in how you're perceived. So we surveyed managers to find out the craziest things they've seen people wear to the office. And bear in mind, these examples were not for Halloween. What not to wear. So here we go. Number 1, pajamas. Studs and motorcycle gear. Short pants and a winter jacket. A see-through dress, a bathing suit, a very, very tight bike shorts, a t-shirt with cut-off sleeves, sandals with socks, a vest with a giant hole in the back, and believe it or not, a chicken suit. All real, all examples that were given to us in a survey that we conducted with managers on this specific topic. And obviously, those examples were large enough that they resonated that they wrote these down. And so if you think about what not to wear to work, now there are some practical tips for making sure your executive presence shows in your clothing choices. Starting with, aim to dress like someone who's already in that next level position or whatever your goal is. So if you've got a specific goal or you've got a role in mind that you'd like to be in, think about that person and how they are presented and what attire should look like in that role. Even if it's casual Friday, dress it up a notch. You still want to look put together and should always strive to look your professional best. Casual Friday was not intended for people to wear beach attire or go completely kind of the other direction. There still needs to be an element of professionalism because you're still in the workplace. Avoid wild patterns that don't let your accessory and don't let those accessories overshadow you. So too much is too much. And always think about how do you want to convey or be perceived in the work environment. Always pay attention to details. So you don't want to spoil your overall image with unkempt hair, chipped nail polish or scuffed shoes, wrinkled, old, or dingy clothing that can make people think that you lack attention to detail, because that's how you're interpreted if all of those things are working against you, and only take just a little bit of attention to get it right. Ultimately, dressing for success isn't necessarily about wearing the nicest or most expensive clothing. It's more just about portraying a professional image and adapting to the business environment that you're currently working in. So dressing for success can be essentially important if you're trying to land a new job. And it's a very competitive job market still. And so presenting a professional image during interviews is more critical than ever. And while attire is not the only thing, certainly applicants are judged on during the interview. There's a lot of different things that go into this. It is definitely part of the equation because it's likely the very first time that you're meeting with somebody, and so first impressions go a very, very long way, both positively and unfortunately negatively. And that real polished appearance can lend immediate credibility when you walk in the door. And it can also set you apart from the competition. It can help employers envision you as a valuable contributor to the team. So again, the potential employer is thinking about what is it that this person can do, what do they bring to the table, what skills do they have, what's their presentation overall. And again, that's appearance, it's all of the other things throughout the interview process. So even if you think that a company has a casual environment, you've done some research or maybe you know somebody that works there and they've told you, yep, it's really cash, no worries. Conduct research to really determine the most appropriate attire. So, you've gone ahead and you've done that. But when in doubt, err on the conservative side and wear a suit. Maybe as a gentleman, you don't wear a tie necessarily because it's a bit more casual, but you can still put on a suit without a tie. Hiring managers aren't likely to fault you for overdressing. Typically, that's not going to be a concern because you can adapt to the dress code once you begin the job, but they'll definitely be critical and certainly fault you for underdressing, and which I think is really important to know. The same basic workplace attire rules we just discussed also apply for interviews, which means you should avoid wearing clothing that may be distracting. Pay attention particularly to those details, excessive accessories, all of those kinds of things, because ultimately you want your experience and skills to be the focus of the interview. That's why you're there, and it's what you can do that can help this company. It's not your outfit. That's not how you want to leave the interview or leave the meeting. So the final step to developing an executive presence is using body language to your advantage. So your body is speaking even if you aren't. And it's like, well, what the heck is it saying then if it's speaking and I'm not even sure what I'm saying? You've probably encountered someone who was saying one thing when you could tell that he or she meant something completely different. Their body language is expressing a very different message than what was coming out of their mouth. And these are easy things to pick up for people that are actually astute and looking for it. So it's that kind of intuition is essential to getting ahead. It's what is my body language conveying? So we're going to go over some basics to ensure that your body language is really reinforcing your message. And that will also help you better interpret what others are saying and what they mean ultimately. So let's start with the head, eyes, and face. And they're really, really important for interpreting body language because it's the center of all our verbal communication. Obviously, if you're speaking, you're using your mouth. People should be, if you're face-to-face, looking at your face. So that's why your eyes, your head, your face are particularly important. Here's a couple of examples. A slightly tilted head shows interest and sympathy. Direct eye contact. That conveys confidence and trust. Looking away repeatedly shows disinterest. It shows preoccupation or impatience. A smile that moves only the corners of the mouth is usually a just to be polite smile and is often false or fake. So something that can very easily be picked up on. A genuine smile with crinkle on the corners of the eyes is really difficult to face and does express genuine happiness. And so, as you think about whether it's the person that you're meeting with or your own facial expressions, how are they coming through, and what do they look like to the person that you're meeting with? Maybe just a bullet on the looking away repeatedly. And in the world we live in, there's constant distractions. And particularly if you're sitting at a desk and you're speaking to somebody directly and there's distractions behind them, meaning maybe there's a glass wall and you can see people walking by, or there's a window and you can see outside. It's very easy to shift your eyes quickly just to look outside, or look away for a minute to see who's out in the hall. And that can really indicate that you're disinterest or you're impatient, and there's other things going on in your head. You're not as focused on what's actually happening in the conversation. So be really aware of that, and it's something to be conscious of when you're sitting in an environment where it's easy to become distracted. Many of us talk with our hands. And if anybody has ever watched me present face-to-face, I use my hands excessively, maybe even often too much. So interpreting arm and hand movement is very, very important. Extended or open arms signifies openness to ideas. So if you're standing with your hands palms up, or your arms are out or extended, it's an openness to new ideas. It's being relaxed, and maybe it's excited. That's kind of the flip of that, but a much more open presentation. On the other hand, if your arms are crossed, that often means discomfort, or it means unease or defensiveness. There's other aggressive, maybe almost aggressive behaviors that sort of people think of when they think of the arms crossed in front of them. Expansive, wide hand gestures indicate passion. So if somebody's using their hands excessively and they're, using that arm or that hand broadly, it's passion. Now, that can come across as being a positive or sometimes a negative if overused, or if used when not appropriate to discuss, maybe you've got a couple of key points you're trying to get across. Hands and arms are used in those examples more broadly, but more closely or tightly for smaller issues or other things that need to be taken very seriously. And fidgeting with your clothes or small objects or constantly touching your face or clothes is definitely a sign of discomfort, meaning I can't wait to get out of this meeting. And so again, that's very easy to interpret. Somebody that's constantly shifting their watch, or their hands or fingers are fidgety, it really comes across that way. Understanding posture is a big part of knowing how to read body language as well. So the torso's body language, those signs are subtle, but they can be really telling, actually. And so a tall, straight torso, whether sitting or standing, shows confidence and ease with a situation. A hunched torso, so somebody that's hunched over, on the other hand, that can indicate tiredness, timidness, or defensiveness. Now, if somebody's hunched over and their arms are crossed, they're really being defensive, or they're really getting into this seriously, and again, could exhibit signs of being closed or shutting down potentially. And when a person consciously or unconsciously mirrors the actions or posture of their conversation partner, it often indicates comfort and maybe even support and agreement with things. If you realize that there's a mirroring going on as you're presenting, or you even find yourself doing it, it's likely because you're in agreement with what's being said or the discussion, and you're showing that maybe in some cases without even knowing. Now, it might be a bit surprising, but people's legs are the best place to look to find out how they're really feeling. And, as we were researching this, I actually didn't realize this and started to question how I sit and what I do with my legs. But standing or sitting with both feet pointing towards the other person means interest and connection. So again, if you're standing and your feet are pointing in that direction, you're engaged. You're thinking about what this person's talking about. You're listening attentively. There's a real engagement factor there. Pointing one foot out or away shows disinterest and a desire to leave. You also question if the foot is pointing towards the door. That really indicates a desire to leave if that's where the foot or leg is going in the course of the meeting. Crossed legs while sitting usually signifies being closed off and unreceptive. So that, kind of leg over the other leg, being a little more closed off. And again, if we had crossed legs, crossed arms, and sat in a hunched way, that would be very, very shut down or closed off for sure. And then shifting weight or shaking one leg shows discomfort, anxiety, or stress. And so something, if you're in a meeting and the person's leg is shaking, or there's all of this, shifting weight back and forth, they may be anxious to get off and do something. There may be something critical that they need to get to, meaning that they may not actually be interpreting as well as we'd like them to what the conversation, has to offer and the takeaways from that conversation or from that discussion. So keep in mind, however, that all the things that I've just talked about are subject to interpretation. And knowing how to read body language, it includes judging the signs you see by the context of the situation and that person's individual quirks. And this is something that as you get to know people, you may begin to realize, oh my gosh, that person wasn't actually doing something that I interpreted in one way, but in fact they meant something completely different. So for example, closed arms are a classic sign of resistance. So we've talked about that in a couple of different ways. It's a stubbornness and maybe even a closed mind. But what if I were to tell you that I'm standing directly beneath the air conditioning vent and it's making me feel a little cold? Chances are I have my arms crossed because I'm trying to keep a little warmer if my arms are crossed over. When someone squints or they narrow their eyes, it usually means that a person is not quite understanding or believing something. So they're, they're not getting it. And then you look at the person, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't think they're getting what I'm saying at all. However, what if I was sitting by a window and just trying to shield my eyes from the glare of the sun? Or maybe I actually forgot my sunglasses or my glasses at home and I can't see as clearly. So I'm squinting because I'm trying to interpret and actually focus my eyes a little more on you because I don't have my glasses on today. Fidgeting and shifting weight can show discomfort, as we talked about. But if you know your boss likes to think on his feet, it could mean a desire to fuel the conversation with movement. Get up and make a movement. That's the reason why he's or she is standing. And the point is you should always consider context and background when interpreting body language. That's really critical. It's important not to come to an immediate conclusion without thinking about what are the other factors that may in fact be involved here. So developing the kind of emotional intelligence that allows you to accurately interpret body language, that's an invaluable skill in developing an executive presence. So that was a lot of information that we went through in a relatively short period of time, and I hope that it's been helpful for everybody in teaching you really how to develop an executive presence and enhance your professional marketability. We do have some time for some questions, and so I am going to open up the Q&A box and talk through some of the questions that were asked. And as I mentioned earlier, if we're not in a position to get through all of them today, we will reach out individually and make sure that we do respond to everybody directly. So first off, let's take a look at a couple of questions. So does this webinar qualify for HRCI or CAP recertification credits? And this webinar is not pre-approved for HRCI or CAP recertification credits. So what are some ways to improve your communication skills? So I think, a couple of things as it relates to communication. Again, consider taking online or in-person courses to boost your communication skills. I think there's some exceptional courses out there that people can take, and they are really helpful. Often these are in group settings where you get to bounce off one another. They're in a low-risk environment, and definitely encourage people to do that. Groups like Toastmasters are good to join if you want to practice public speaking, and they can help you from whether it's standing up in front of a crowd or those same presentation skills can help you in meetings and in speaking with colleagues and otherwise. And then I would say also when writing or presenting something, it never hurts to get feedback from others on what you'd like to improve. So, if there's other things that you need help with or you'd like to do, I'd highly recommend that just constantly be asking people for that feedback for ways of improvement. Here's a question: is it okay to dress casually if your work environment is more informal? And I would say that workers may be tempted to dress down, especially in warmer months and in warmer climates. I mean, depending on where you're located. But wearing clothing that's too casual and certainly too revealing is definitely a no-no. Keep in mind that more casual dress code doesn't necessarily mean no dress code at all. So it's always just advisable to understand the dress code within the organization that you work with. Most companies have spelled that out, meaning our dress code is business casual or our dress code is casual. And here are the things that are acceptable to wear in our work environment, and then use those as the guidelines for your for your dress code personally, and that's likely the best way. The other thing too, you can always look at those around you. Now, that isn't always the best test, because in some cases the people around you may in fact give they may not have the right dress code either. So just be careful on that one. But understanding your dress code is particularly important. Will copies of this presentation be available? You can access a copy of the slides by clicking on that resource list icon on the console toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And so it's the green icon with the little folder on it. And that's the best one to hit in order to be able to get that presentation. What should I do if what should you do if you want a promotion at your current company? So in this one, I'd say a couple of things. If you're looking for a promotion and you're looking for that next step, definitely talk to your manager. I think probably above and beyond everything else, be proactive. Speak with your boss about your long-term plans. Your manager may know of opportunities within the department that you don't know. They may also have insight into future jobs, meaning, they may have insight on a department that's looking to hire that maybe you weren't aware of. And if they're not aware that you're interested in that next move or taking on more responsibility, then there's chances that they may not put you forward for it. Not for any bad reasons, they just aren't aware. So getting them or bringing them into the loop early is important. I would say upgrading your skills. So particularly if there's areas that maybe you feel, gosh, I'm a little underdeveloped on this. The company expects high usage of Excel or PowerPoint in the next level of jobs, or the people in this role that I'd like to work in or do at some point have a skill set that I don't. Gain that knowledge, work to gain that knowledge through courses. Speak to your manager if there are courses that are company offered that can assist, or if there's any budget for external courses. You never know. There's often money set aside for education that they can ante up, particularly if they know you're proactively interested in improving your skills. And then expanding your network. So I know, we spoke a little bit about this. By being connected at work, you can learn a lot of the opportunities that might interest you that you may not have been aware of. And again, other people have insight that they would definitely be you definitely want to be aware of and know of. So is there a replay? Yes, there is a recording. The webinar is being recorded. So following this event, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording. And you'll also be able to access the recording a few hours after this event using the same link that you used for the live recording. So if you're looking for that replay, that's the best way to go get it. And again, you'll receiving the link just in a few hours' time. The question, I seem to freeze up during interviews. Is there something I can do to improve on this? And I think it's an excellent question in that it happens to a lot of people. I mean, an interview is a bit of an unnatural environment in a way because you're put into a microcosm in front of somebody who you don't know that's drilling you with questions. And, I think a couple of things. Number one, practice before the interview with a friend or a family member. Get them to ask you questions that you anticipate may be asked. Express to them what you've done in your prior jobs and get them to give you feedback regarding your answer so that it doesn't A, sound canned, but B, it feels as natural to you as possible, but it hits those core things, your contributions, the things that you've accomplished in that job. And that's really, really critical to a next employer where they're looking for somebody that, what have they done and what can they do for me in future jobs. Take a deep breath, relax going in. I'd recommend actually before an interview not drinking too much caffeine because it can sometimes get people anxious or make people nervous unless your body demands it and you absolutely need it. But again, be relaxed, be yourself, sit upright, present well, be prepared with your facts, with your resume, with any other details, and sometimes they can be a little fun. I think it's also good to come prepared with questions that you can ask, which will help move that interview along as well, and help engage the person you're interviewing with to get them to open up. I think it's easy sometimes when the interviewer opens up a little bit, the interviewee feels a little more at ease. All right. Well, that's about all the time that we have for today. So I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this webinar. I hope that you found all the information useful. I am sorry that I didn't have time to answer all the questions, but definitely will respond to each of you individually. Really appreciate all the questions. I know there's a lot that have come in today. Again, thank you for your time and your attention today, and have a wonderful Administrative Professionals Week. Thanks very much, everyone.